you would do is because these are so small, they're made of brass, so they can weather time as well. They can be washed frequently, and they can be brought out for festivals and brought on what we call parikram, or they can be what do they call it? How do you say it? What's that more English kind of vernacular way of saying that? Parikram.
Circumambulate.
What's that? Yeah, circumambulate. But I was thinking of a
procession.
Procession. Thank you very much. That was the word I was looking for. But yeah, the circumambulation is the more critically technical, right? Because you circumambulate. Are there a temple, right? So the small deities would actually do rounds about the big deity, right? And so that would be one of the big festival sort of vestibular events. But of course, these deities are built to last, right? And this is also kind of an eco-friendly response, right? Because you don't have to throw away. But at the same time, what you see here is something that's more maintenance-oriented, right? These people, the people that maintain this temple, do not do this seasonally, right? This is a daily event. They've invited these deities in to stay, right? They want them to stay. They're going to wake up in the morning. They're going to feed them sweets. They're going to sing sweet songs to them. They're going to feed them, breakfast. They're going to put them to rest. They're going to put them, wake them up at noon and do another round of bhajan or singing and music and performance. They maybe give a lecture on, theology or ethics or philosophy in front of them to an audience of practitioners or pilgrims, right? And then there's, of course, they are the center of a community, and they define its sort of religious activities in a very strong sense. So this is a very sort of, when iconoclasm comes into this sort of environment, it's a little bit more tricky to deal with, right? Because these aren't intended to be disposed of so easily. These are considered to be, living as much as you and I. So that's one kind of extreme situation where politically more tangled ethical issues can arise. And of course, right off the beginning, I already signaled some images where iconoclasm has been problematic, right? The destruction of the Buddhas in Afghanistan and images like that. So that said, I'm not sure about this. This is a question for me, and that is to say whether we take this sort of animal as itself subject to a kind of iconoclasm, right? Because it's a ritual activity that is intended to be performed generally on behalf of some sort of host deity, but in itself it is the ceasing of a life. And so one may talk about it purely in terms of, at least for Eastern traditions that believe that all creatures have souls, or at least that all have consciousness or something of that sort, then the question of the sanctity of this creature can also be brought into question, whether there's a severing of soul and body or of consciousness and body. And so this could also potentially be a question that we can fold into the question of iconoclasm and the kind of forms it can take on. Then we have this sort of pedagogical, these narrative forms of iconoclasm, which are very intriguing. And I brought up in my little blurb of this question about Georges Dumézil, who's a French classicist, and he studies mythologies and things like that. And he's actually drawn some very interesting sort of relationships between the South Asian deity Varuna and this deity Uranus, who's here on the ground being castrated by his son Kronos, who's one of the Titans. And there's different elements in this narrative that seem to me to reflect a sort of iconoclasm, right? For instance, it's complicated. I think the entire narrative may itself be intended to teach something, to teach a lesson on iconoclasm. It's something that I'm exploring. But part of that has to do with the fact that Uranus himself is a deity of heaven. In other words, he embodies heaven, but he embodies the heaven of night, right? And then his grandson, who is mediated through Kronos, because he's Kronos' son. So you have Uranus, father of night, and you have Kronos, who's this kind of mediary, dangerous being, and then his own son is Zeus. And so Zeus is actually born to Kronos by Rhea. And Rhea is basically really upset because Kronos has already eaten the other children that were born of her. And so this is a kind of a cycle of narrative, right? Because Uranus trapped his children, the Titans, like it includes beings like Cyclopses and giants and monsters and things like that, 100 arms and 50 heads and things like that. He's trapped them within the bowels of the earth, which in this sense I think is something of a maternal narrative or maternal metaphor. where the earth is a mother who has to bear these entities that Ernest has produced and are, you know, kind of monstrous. And so she's upset at Ernest because he's trapped them inside her, and so she decides to conspire with her children, the Titans, and says, like, you know, somebody's got to get revenge on Ernest, and so they decide to castrate him. Kronos is the only one, he's the youngest of all the Titans, and he agrees to do it. But because he's castrated his father, there's also a curse upon him that he himself will be disposed from power by his own children. So in order to stop that, he decides to consume his own children. Now his wife Rhea decides to trick him, and she saves the youngest one, and instead decides to give Kronos a stone that is wrapped in cloth. And I think that may be right there talking about idolatry, right? Because Kronos has been associated, at least in antiquity, with time itself, and I think there's some interesting arguments for that. And I don't want to get into debate on that because I don't really know the literature well enough to really take sides on this. But one of the things is that, at least in antiquity, he was regarded as sort of signifying time itself. And so there's this question of, you know, time can swallow a stone, but it doesn't get the child, right? But who's the child that it doesn't get? Well, it's this deity that's associated with the day sky, right? Zeus, or Dios in the Sanskrit, right? So, and so Georges Dumézil has talked about this cycle of narratives both in Mesopotamia and South Asia as sort of indicating a very similar cycle. So in South Asia, you have the deity Varuna. You see here he rides upon a dragon. Of course, it's the night sky around him. Varuna he holds here a rope, which he uses to restrain those who are adharmic, those who go against Ritta, right? He is considered to be the sort of the guarantor or the guardian of Ritta, the world order. And Ritta itself is kind of this precursor to Dharma. It's the natural order. It's not so anthropic yet. It's still quite just how nature itself works out, and people who go against it are bound by Varuna. Well, you know, in Uranus, the Titans are also bound up in the earth. So there's a kind of, again, a sort of a sense of being restrained in both of these deities, and restrain their offspring. Varuna is in some traditions considered to be the first of gods. So this idea of, and in fact, the word Titan actually means the straining ones. So it's a very interesting sort of cycle of things. If we think of the Titans as spirits that are captured within stone, then we can think of them as straining in the sense that they've been fixed. And so again, there can be a kind of an iconoclastic teaching, and we can read the narrative that way. And then, of course, so here's Indra, who's also fights in this sort of Rig Vedic cycle of narratives. He fights against a great dragon named Vritra. But if you look at his name in Avestan, then it's Veretragna, which just means the slayer of Veretra. It's just a different pronunciation, right? But that Veretra is also, again, supposed to be, according to Georges Dumézil's thesis, or hypothesis, I don't know how strong I'm going to lean on this, but he has this idea that Oronos is itself a term which is associated with this Veretra and Varuna. It's kind of an intriguing idea. So then we're talking, I wanted to offer a thought about the metaphysical question of iconoclasm, and where that's been addressed, of course, is in St. Augustine in his work, The City of God. I haven't actually taken a look at the work. I've been told that this is the place where one needs to look in order to get a sense of Western theological criticisms of icon worship. And it's one of the places I've been told to look. So I still want to do some work on that. But yeah, if you guys have other ideas. And then, of course, the ethical question has been brought to light very strikingly. Well, if we say brought to light, that might be a misnomer. But it's been made an issue by Emmanuel Levinas. And so there's a question of this concept of an Apollonian religion, right? This deity of light sort of orientation towards religion versus the secluded darkness, the enigma of the other person. Yeah. Anyways, I'll try to move along a little quickly because I think I'm losing people. So, anyway, finally, I'm getting to the question of aesthetics. And aesthetics for me is a question of the idea of physical beauty, of what appears. And can that become a subject for iconoclasm? I did bring up already the question of an animal's sort of objectivity as an image or as a physical thing that can then be used in a ritual in a way that we could try to fold into an iconoclastic narrative. But beyond that, we have more obvious examples where people are, icons in the more obvious sense, and are also subject to a kind of destruction of their aesthetic features, and this can become a question of ethics. And I think here we see more strikingly how aesthetics itself can become a question of concern for the self-image and the damage of self-image that comes with hatred of self-image, right? And so this is a very sticky issue for me. And this is one of the things that I think of when I think about what an iconoclastic culture might produce, right? If there is a hatred of image, if there is a hatred of self-image, can this be, is this iconoclasm? That's a question that I have, right? So I just want to, I don't know, for me, it's almost bracing how much this becomes a concern for me. And if you're a screenist, then you may want to avert your eyes, because the next one is even worse. So we have Fakra Yunus, who recently committed suicide because she had acid poured on her face, right? This is actually an unbelievably common event in certain parts of the world, right? And it's extremely disturbing, yeah? And when you look at it, then it kind of suddenly opens up a question of almost like the dignity of beauty, right? And how people can be defaced, and how an iconoclastic attitude can itself be destructive towards the person. Is this a critique of beauty? We can't call this merely aesthetic, right? But there is no doubt an aesthetic element to it. So the human factor in iconoclasm brings us full circle. And it makes us question aesthetics in a way that almost asks us to make aesthetics a question for ethics, but not in a way that destroys the necessity of the image as part of our human experience. Anyways, so the final question I'm trying to ask is whether iconoclasm itself constitutes the best metaphor to bring to the question of how to frame and describe the ethical encounter with the other. And then, so this is the sort of question that I have. Now, I'll leave it there. And yeah, if you guys have anything you'd like to say, I would really like to get your feedback on this.
So can we ask questions now? Yeah.